pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another page 112 tag, the book haul version. Two of these three books I have hauled quite recently. One of them maybe a couple of years ago. I'm not going to give you any spiel. Check the show notes if you don't know what the page 112 tag is. And let's go! The first book, there's a lovely sentence which begins at the bottom of page 111, and I'm going to elect to include that, even though it's a very long sentence which starts several lines up from the bottom of page 111, but I'm going to exercise my prerogative. Eventually he ceased to eat anything, but while he was still being persuaded to sip some soup, he told Angela, who was holding the spoon, that tomato-based soups were always improved by oregano, sweet basil, a touch of sugar. And when she read the political news in the Times to him out loud under his direction, John Kennedy had just won the election and was selecting people for his administration, Theo would comment short and sour, "He'll never get off the ground with those men." It was prophetic. One day Angela passed the door while Tina sat for a few minutes in the rocking chair, and she overheard her ardent daughter, who was then about 14 and who'd just swept her own young arms across the wall, tell her uncle of her plans to be a writer too, that the only way she could have a meaningful life was by becoming a writer. "If you continue to use the word meaningful," Theo said in the small, raspy voice left to him, "you might as well give up all thought of becoming a writer. You will have lacked the ear." And he searched the walls with his eyes, and his fingers plucked the air. It was the first time Angela heard the meaning of meaningful through this dying brain, and had she ever used it before, she never used it again. It was not pettiness, but the economy of his dying mind that rid itself of all extraneous energies and emotions that made him seem petty. His humor went right out the door. He suddenly was never funny again, and one couldn't successfully be light with him. Before he lost his wits, he lost his wit, and then it can be seen very starkly what human burdens wit carries in the service of love. "I'll tell you, Bill, it seems odd to me," Angela said one night when he was upstairs dying and they were downstairs waiting, "that he, in the end, let this death take its own slow pace, instead of intervening. For some people it looks as though there's a time where they're still in command. Then they reach a point when they deliver themselves over to being cared for. They have to intervene before that point, or they won't do it. With Theo, you would think he wouldn't tolerate the indignity of this seemingly inevitable characterological decay that he was promised." Okay, what did you think of that? There was one or two things, especially that last sentence, that I didn't care for, but in the main, I was very, very impressed with this page. I do know this is a debut novel, so I'm maybe willing to forgive a lot for the way that much of this prose throbs gorgeously. I love the writing. Again, a few exceptions, but so much of it is just finely polished prose. Before he lost his wits, he lost his wit. There's a very long sentence that starts with Uncle Theo being fed soup and then commenting on the incoming Kennedy administration that I thought was just a fantastic sentence. However, there's a few that just are a little bit too much. Especially that last sentence was awful. You have no idea how many times I had to read it aloud before I could get it out. With Theo, you would think he wouldn't tolerate the indignity of this seemingly inevitable characterological decay that he was promised. That is really awful. And there's another one where there's so many that's that it's really difficult to read, and I think the sentence could have been tightened up. Which one was that? This one. "It was not pettiness, but the economy of his dying mind." So this is the first way that I read it, and then you go down the wrong garden path, and you have to back up. It was not pettiness, but the economy of his dying mind that rid itself of all extraneous energies and emotions. Then you come to a comma and another that, so then you got to start over. Because this is how it should be read, but it's because it's not a great sentence that you get tripped up. Do you agree with me? It was not pettiness, but the economy of his dying mind that rid itself of all extraneous energies and emotions that made him seem petty. If it had been a better constructed sentence, the reader would not have been waylaid the way I was. But, other than those two, really, this is a gorgeous piece of writing. And what about the daughter, the ardent daughter, Tina, who'd just swept her own young arms across the wall? I'm dying to know what that means. To sweep her own young arms across the wall? I don't know. How do you feel about Angela? Why is she seems impatient for Uncle Theo to kick the bucket. And it seems to be, if it's her husband, Bill, I don't know who Bill is, but they seem to be talking about why didn't Uncle Theo take his own life when he had the chance? Not sure about that, but that's very intriguing. Yeah, I really like it. For a debut novel, 2 clunky sentences amidst a garden of gorgeous prose. Yeah, okay. Book number 2. This happens to be the beginning of a chapter. Once again, Victoria was the bearer of what she considered bad news to the nursery. She was quite pleased to do it. She had prophesied trouble, and trouble had come. That is always gratifying to the prophet, if to no one else. But Victoria did not derive the satisfaction she had expected from her communication to the girls. After an exclamation or two, they said nothing more. They would not show their feelings to her. They could hardly show them to each other. They felt a peculiar distaste, a shame even. Their father had always been aloof, remote, unserious in his paternal relationship to them. But unconsciously they had liked him like that. They were used to thinking of him like that, and they suffered obscurely from having to see him in this new light as the husband of Anthea and the father of someone, not themselves. They did not speak of this, but they discussed other aspects of the subject. "We shall have to give up the nursery when it comes," said Christine, "and go down and live with them." "Oh dear," groaned Penelope. "I hadn't thought of that." "Oh, what does she want to go having a baby for, at her age? Doesn't she know it's dangerous? Christine, I hope I never have a baby," she burst out suddenly. "I hope I never do. I think it's awful. Every time I see a woman who's going to have a baby, I think, have I got to go through that? Every time I read about it in novels, I think, I never could." Agreed Christine. "It's an awful prospect. But if I got married, I should want some children. Married people without children look so aimless, wandering about." I really like that one too. I would say I love that, especially the opening. Victoria was quite pleased to bear bad news to the nursery. I just fall in love with Victoria in the first 2 sentences. It's always gratifying to the prophet, if to no one else. So she's obviously telling the girls that their father is their father's wife, so presumably their stepmother, I don't know, but their father's wife is pregnant. And they're not happy about it. The dialogue between them I thought was really cute. It's obviously antiquated. It's a bit old-fashioned prose. It was amusing, but I loved the expository prose up until that conversation so much. Yeah, it's really smart, witty writing. I can visualize the daughters, Christine and Penelope. I can visualize the father and even his new wife, if she's a new wife. But especially Victoria. Who is she, the governess or something? The maid? Yeah, this sounds really good. And lastly, book number 3. Also the beginning of a chapter. Lucia had failed to convince the directors of the Southern Railway that the Royal Fish Train was a practicable scheme. Should their Majesties, so ran the final communication, express their royal wish to be supplied with fish from Tilling, the directors would see that the delivery was made with all expedition. But in their opinion, the ordinary resources of the line will suffice to meet their requirements, of which at present no intimation has been received. "A sad want of enterprise, Georgie," said the mayor as she read this discouraging reply. "A failure to think municipally and to see the distinction of bringing an Elizabethan custom up to date. I shall not put the scheme before my council at all." Lucia dropped the unenterprising ultimatum into the waste paper basket. The afternoon post had just arrived, and the 2 letters which it brought for her followed the ultimatum. "My syllabus for a series of lectures at the Literary Institute is not making a good start," she said. "I asked Mr. Desmond McCarthy to talk to us about the less-known novelists of the time of William IV, but he has declined. Nor can Mr. Noel Coward speak on the technique of the modern stage on any of the 5 nights I offered him. I am surprised that they should not have welcomed the opportunity to get more widely known." "Tarsome of them," said Georgie sympathetically. "Such a chance for them." Lucia gave him a sharp glance, then mused for a while in silence over her scheme. Fresh ideas began to flood her mind, so copiously that she could scarcely scribble them down fast enough to keep up with them. "I think I will lecture on the Shakespearean drama myself," she said. "That should be the inaugural lecture, say April the 15th. I don't seem to have any engagements that night, and you will take the chair for me. Georgie, we might act a short scene together, without dresses or scenery, to illustrate the simplicity of the Elizabethan stage." Well, I know this. I haven't read this novel, but I know a lot about the characters. That's enough said. So it's going to be really hard for me to talk about it without dipping into my knowledge of other books in this series. So as much as I can evaluate it on its own merit, I thought it was fantastic and very amusing. Lucia is a ball of fire, and she's the mayor of somewhere, and she has had her proposal to start a royal fish train turned down by Buckingham Palace. And she's talking to Georgie, and she's disappointed and throws the proposal into the waste paper basket. And she's also been thwarted for the series of lectures that she wanted to start at her literary institute. I did Google Desmond McCarthy, and he was a real literary critic of this time. Whether he was an expert on the lesser-known novelists of the William IV era, I have no idea. Noel Coward, I think we all know, was a famous playwright of the era. And then she's going on to deliver her own keynote. Huh? Why is that gotten all foggy suddenly? Deliver her own... there we go. To deliver her own keynote lecture on Shakespearean drama. Yeah, I thought it was very amusing and witty, and I liked it very much. Can't think of one bad thing to say about it. Okay, so what would be your first, second, and third picks in terms of the books that you might be most likely to pick up? Mine, I think this is the first time this has ever happened, that the order of my preferences is going to be the exact same order of the ones I read them. So book number 1 is my first pick, book number 2 is my second pick, and book number 3 is my third pick. They're all very close together. Maybe 2 points between all of them. Book number 1, even though there was a couple wobbly sentences that I didn't like, I thought the writing was really fascinating, and it pulled me deep into... There's a subterranean undertow to this story that it seems like it's some kind of maybe an extended family drama, but that the characters are going to be really rich just from the way that the prose was spun. So I would be willing to put up with 1 or 2 of those bloated sentences just to really sink into the story that this writer is otherwise spinning for me, because it was really engrossing based on 1 page only. Book number 2, maybe a 1.5 separation. I mean, I can't think of anything bad to say. It just grabbed me 1.5 points less than the first one, even though I can't identify any flaws in it. Yeah, I loved it too. And really, 2 points below that is book number 3. It's a comedy, so I tend to prefer more serious fiction, and I know for a fact that this is mostly comedy. However well written it is, so, and I will read it someday, and I look forward to reading it, but in terms of these three books, it would be number 3, but very close to the other two. Alright, so here are the books. Book number 1, which was my first pick, is The Sea Change of Angela Lewis by Cynthia Proper Seton. I talked about Cynthia Proper Seton in the joint review I did with Ange of Beyond the Pages of the Book of Forgotten Authors by Christopher Fowler, and it was the essay on this writer who we had never heard of, Cynthia Proper Seton, that fascinated each of us maybe the most out of the 99 essays there. So I could get this book. This paperback book was in stock in Amazon Japan for $5, and I got it in my hot little hands. And this is her debut, published in 1971. And if you saw that review video, I said there were no photos of Cynthia Proper Seton on the internet, but there's one on the back of this Norton edition. So this woman is just fascinating. So this is her debut. So if she writes this well in her debut, and there's 5 more novels to read by her, I'm just so excited. And all 6 of her novels are in stock in Tokyo on Amazon Japan. This novel is about a housewife who starts to, as she's pushing 40, and then probably late 1960s, is starting to become independent and feminist. Christopher Fowler compared her prose to Jane Austen, Proust, and George Eliot, maybe. I can see some of that. I mean, that's a bit of a stretch, but no, I think this prose is really, really rich. So I will be buddy reading this with Ange very soon. What about that? Why did they put her name in that purple on a black cover? That is just ridiculous, especially on the spine. Can you see her name there? Barely. Anyway, I'm dying to find out if any of you have ever heard of Cynthia Proper Seton. She died in about 1981. She was young. She wrote 6 novels. She's an American novelist. Nobody's ever heard her. I think Ange and I are going to, if we like her novels as much as I think we're going to like them, we're going to proselytize about her on BookTube maniacally. So that was book number 1, and my first choice. Book number 2, which was my second choice, is The Priory by Dorothy Whipple. This is a Persephone book, and this was published in 1939. This, of course, is a reprint. And this is a book about a British family that lives on some hereditary property that's fallen on hard times. And the 2 girls, their father, a widower, is fairly old, and he remarries he gets married again to a much younger woman. And as we know, the younger woman, Anthea, becomes pregnant. So I just thought the writing here was fabulous. I have another Dorothy Whipple kicking around here. I will also be buddy reading this chunkster with Ange sooner rather than later. Dorothy Whipple was born in 1893, died the year of my birth, 1966, wrote 9 very successful novels. I love her name, Dorothy Whipple. It sounds like a dessert, isn't that terrible? I wonder what she looked like. I've never seen a picture of her, but there must be pictures of her. So if you're curious about Dorothy Whipple, and I can find one online, this is what Dorothy Whipple looked like. And the last one, my third pick, but still a book that I'm really going to enjoy reading and we'll get to soon, is Trouble for Lucia by E.F. Benson. So this is part of the Map and Lucia series, and I just reread Map and Lucia, the 1935 novel. At the time that I'm making this video, it was just last week. This is 2 novels later in the series, so this was also published in 1939. I read the first novel in the series called, I've forgotten the name of it, and I didn't like it. So I read Map and Lucia last year, and then I did the first novel in the series, Lucia Makes History, or I've forgotten, I'll put the title down here, on audio. Didn't like it, because it was of such lesser literary quality than Map and Lucia. But this one is 2 novels later, and I thought that the writing here stood up really well. I thought it was great. So I look forward to reading it. I'll probably read the intervening novel, but I don't know what it is. I don't think it's here. Yeah, I don't know. So that is my page 112 tag with some older books, 1939 and 1971. Look forward to your comments. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.